And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last Braver Angels debate of the 2020 election season. Thank you all so very much for being here with us tonight. It is an extraordinary pleasure to be able to engage in the deep work of dialogue and democracy here with you tonight. And we are joined by an extraordinary group of special guests, folks ranging out from across the spectrum of ideas and perspectives. You're going to hear from all of them in just a moment. But first of all, let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about who we are and why we're here tonight. And I'd like to preface this remark by saying that I want to extend on behalf of Braver Angels a special thought and prayer to our good friend Dominique DiPrima, radio show host from KJLH in Los Angeles, host of The Front Page with Dominique DiPrima. She was supposed to be here with us tonight. Unfortunately, she suffered a loss. Her mother passed today. And so our thoughts are with her. She's an extraordinary voice, and we hope to welcome her back to our program and to our events very soon. Braver Angels is America's largest grassroots bipartisan organization working on the project of political depolarization. You might think about that as just creating dialogue between the two sides. What we do goes deeper than that and goes farther than that. What we seek to do is to create the context for relationships to build between folks on the left and the right so that we may not only understand one another again, but find opportunities to work together again towards the building of a more perfect union. Because regardless of who wins the election, regardless of what the outcome is on election day, the day after that, and the day that we cast the ballots for that matter, we have to remember that we share a country together. And that the work of making our politics work does not succeed unless we remember the fact that we are not enemies, we are neighbors. And so why hold a debate if what we're trying to do is set the stage for the American people to relate to each other again? It's because there is nothing wrong with us having differences and deep differences over the direction of our country. But the way we engage our differences can either be humanizing or it can destroy our ability to work together after the argument is done. The folks you are going to hear from tonight are leaders in various parts of American life. They are folks who understand their arguments. They are folks who have a deep relationship to the issues. But they're also patriotic Americans who are here tonight because they don't just care about their side, but they share about the country that right and left, we all share. And so having a debate on an issue as intense as who we're going to vote for in this craziest of all elections is something that's going to bring out deep passions and feelings in all of us. It's a challenge to have a debate in that context that doesn't stir forth some sense of aggravation sometimes. But we're going to wade through those tough feelings and show folks how to have these debates in the Braver Angels way. How to have these debates with patriotic empathy and a sense of goodwill for those with whom we disagree. So without further ado, and by the way, I should have said up top, my name is John Wood Jr. I'm National Ambassador for Braver Angels. Pleased to be here tonight. And now I'm going to hand the program over to my good friend and colleague and designer of the Braver Angels debate program, tonight's chairperson, Ms. April Lawson. April, go ahead and take us away.
Thank you so much, John. And I'm really looking forward to tonight. I think that this is a really important moment for us, for the country, for everyone, and that tonight's conversation will honor that and show some of the best of what we can be. We have a wonderful group of folks here tonight, and Silas, I would love for you to share with us who's here.
All right. Can everybody hear me real well?
Yes.
All right. I am so pleased to introduce this panel. I've had the pleasure of speaking with all of them personally, and they represent such a diversity of viewpoints and perspectives and experiences. Our first panelist today is Ms. Julie Lythcott-Haims. Julie, if you can wave, thank you so much. Julie is the New York Times bestselling author of the Anti-Helicopter Parenting Manifesto, How to Raise an Adult, and the popular TED Talk on the same theme. Her second book is the critically acclaimed and award-winning prose poetry memoir, Real American, which illustrates her experience as a Black and a biracial person in white spaces. Julie's a former corporate lawyer and Stanford dean. Can we have some jazz hands for Julie? All right. Following Ms. Lythcott-Haims will be Roxanne Hoge, or you might know her as Roxanne Beckford because she is a comedian, television, film, and stage actor, and a small business owner. She is known for her performances in the TV show A Different World and the film Something's Gotta Give, as well as Father of the Bride 2, among others. In 2018, she was a Republican candidate for California's 46th Assembly District. Roxanne, can you wave to the audience? Can I bring Roxanne?
She picked up jazz hands for anybody, I just got to say.
I have the feeling that Roxanne was born with jazz hands, but maybe that's just me. Joining us later this evening will be Richard Dick Gephardt. Dick Gephardt is the former U.S. congressman who served as House Majority Leader from 1989 to 1995 and Minority Leader from 1995 to 2003. He represented Missouri in the House of Representatives from 1977 until 2005. He was twice a candidate for president in the Democratic primaries of 1988 and 2004, and he's also served in the United States Air Force and the Missouri Air National Guard. And we'll welcome him with jazz hands when he arrives in about 15 minutes. Following him will be Daniel McCarthy. Dan, could you please wave for us? All right. Daniel McCarthy is the editor-in-chief of the conservative magazine of ideas, Modern Age. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it, just as a side note. Very thoughtful. He also serves as director of the Robert Novak Journalism Fellowship Program at the Fund for American Studies. From 2010 through 2016, he served as editor of the American Conservative. His writings appeared in the New York Times, USA Today, The Spectator. He's been interviewed on NPR, the BBC, Fox Business, and many other outlets. He previously served as on the campaign for Ron Paul for president. Jazz hands for Daniel McCarthy. Up next, another guest who will be joining us slightly later in the evening, Charlotte Clymer. Charlotte.
So she just got here.
Oh,
yeah.
Charlotte, can you wave for the camera?
Thanks.
Hey. So Charlotte is a writer and LGBTQ plus advocate, a Twitter influencer, and the former press secretary at the Human Rights Campaign. From 2005 until 2012, she served in the U.S. Army. She's an outspoken activist on issues including transgender rights, feminism, and veterans affairs. She has written articles for publications including Glamour, The Independent, NBC News, Vice, and the Huffington Post, and has appeared as a guest commentator on CBS News Sunday Morning. Jazz hands for Charlotte, please. Our final panelist tonight, not finalist, because one more after this list. Our second and last panelist will be Hunter Baker. Professor Baker, or I should say Dr. Baker, can you wave at us, please? And I'm happy to introduce Hunter because he serves as the Dean of Arts and Sciences and Professor of Political Science at Union University in Jackson, Tennessee. He lectures widely on religion and liberty. He's the author of 3 books, including most recently, The System Has a Soul, Essays on Christianity, Liberty, and Political Life. He also serves as contributing editor of Touchstone, a journal of mere Christianity, and a research fellow of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Please welcome with jazz hands, Hunter Baker. And our final panelist tonight, Bret Weinstein, is an American biologist, an evolutionary theorist who came to national attention during the 2017 Evergreen State College protests. He's considered a member of the informal group of personalities that you might know as the intellectual dark web. And he is the host of Bret Weinstein's Dark Horse podcast, as well as a founder of the Unity 2020 movement. Bret, could you wave for the camera? Okay. And jazz hands for Bret. I'm really excited for this panel to begin, so I will pass it to April to move the resolution.
All righty, spectacular. Well, folks, you can see it's going to be a great experience tonight, and here we go. I'm going to call this debate to order, and the topic is, which presidential candidate is the leader America needs right now? So first, we will go to Julie. Ms. Lythcott-Haims, please unmute yourself. You have 6 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I also want to say that I have butterflies. I think this is a perilous time in the life of America. I feel it. I know we all feel it. I'm also just feeling butterflies because I'm not accustomed to being in this format with such luminaries. So maybe I can relate, or many of you watching can relate to me. and feeling kind of like a regular person, just trying to have a conversation about what matters to me. I'm going to tell you briefly who I am, because who I am informs why I believe Joe Biden is the right person for our country at this time. I'm a 52-year-old Black and biracial woman. I have lived all over these United States, and I currently call the San Francisco Bay Area my home. I was born to a Black father and a white mother. My Black father was a physician who helped eradicate smallpox from the planet, a different plague from a different time. And he went on to be Assistant Surgeon General of the United States under President Jimmy Carter. And my white mother is originally from England. Yes, that's right. My immigrant parent is a white person from England, and she's probably the best teacher this planet has ever seen. She went on to get a PhD in science education to teach other people how to be better science teachers. I come from those people, highly educated people who gave me educational opportunity, raised me middle class, and then we made it into the upper middle class. We lived the American dream. But I learned as a 4-year-old that something was wrong with me because of the color of my skin, and something was wrong with my Black daddy too. I could tell this from the looks on the faces of strangers, that racist sneer that says, you don't belong here, and maybe I'm here to harm you. I learned young, as millions of Americans do, that if you have brown skin in this country, some people see you as less than, as not deserving of America's bounty and opportunity, as problematic. I bet many people on the call tonight can relate. Now, some of the people on the call tonight are going to critique me for speaking to identity politics. And if you're that person, I want you to know that one's identity can impact the quality of one's life in America. And so the personal, for too many of us, is the political. There are 3 reasons I'm supporting Joe Biden. First, I've been forced to ask myself, what does it even mean to be in a society? I mean, I thought society meant a group of people who will come together and pull together when we face an existential threat like climate change or COVID-19. And I have been dismayed in the last 6-7 months to discover that no, we are not a society. In fact, we will allow this virus to divide us even further. We have people who will not wear masks to protect one another because they fear their own freedoms are being threatened. I'm supporting Biden because he's going to tell us all to wear masks, and I'm delighted that he's going to do so. I'm also supporting Biden because I do a lot of thinking about what it means to be an American. We say this is a place of liberty and justice for all, but this is historically untrue and not true even in the present moment. We made a lot of progress over the years. The 60s were a moment of great progress, but the rise of white supremacy has been happening in the last few decades. People who think that this is and always has been and always should be a country for white people. And this is not just an ideology of pride. This is an ideology that often comes packed with arms. An ideology that wants to take some of us down, an ideology that has many of us in its crosshairs, which I find terrifying. We saw the rise of white supremacy when Barack Obama was becoming a viable candidate for the Democratic nomination. We saw gun sales soar. We saw hate groups being joined in record numbers. And we had Sarah Palin saying who was and who wasn't a real American, starting to divide us on the basis of skin color and gender and sexual orientation and immigration status and so on. So I've been asking myself for some time now, what does it mean to be a real American? Because I'm pretty sure we all are. And I'm interested in a president that believes that too. When the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists marched in with tiki torches and khaki shirts outside the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, I was terrified. I was a 49-year-old terrified Black woman who hadn't seen these folks dare to march so boldly since I was a little girl. I don't want to be terrified. I want a president who will stand up instead of telling the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. I want a president who will work toward de-escalating the rhetoric and the violence around who is and who is not a real American. And finally, I've had to ask, what does it mean to be a Democrat? We Democrats believe that the government is there to ensure that everybody has a chance to make it. As Mario Cuomo said, as governor of New York in 1984, you know, the Republicans think the survival of the fittest. The Democrats think we only win if we all get there together. And that's what I happen to believe. So whether it's healthcare or those people who are poor and struggling, or the climate or education. I'm a Democrat and I support policies that pay attention to the needs of us all. Joe Biden knows intrinsically that all lives do matter, but that as a matter of policy and practice in America, all lives don't yet matter. He wants to do something about that, and I believe he can. Thank you.
Very good. All right, jazz hands for our brave first speaker. I love it, Roxanne, you're already there. Good, good, good. All right, are there questions for the speaker? And I will note that you often will be taking questions from the panelists first to give y'all attendees a second to stick any additional questions that have come to mind in the Q&A box, and then we will go to attendee questions. People have up to 30 seconds to ask a question and up to 1 minute to answer them. So, questions for the speaker. And panelists, you can just raise your hand, like I said. All right. Looks like she stumped you. So I'm kidding, of course. We'll start with Michael Kane. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you,
question
Mr.
to me.
Chair. Certainly, Madam Chair, I'd like to know how the speaker believes the federal government will enforce a national mask mandate.
Okay. Go ahead, Julie.
Well, I know that when someone I respect, who has relationships across the aisle, stands up in front of us all on Zoom and tells us with conviction and heart what the policy should be, a whole lot of us are likely to fall in line. So I'm not sure the federal government has the power to enforce masks, but I know that a human being who has the courage of their convictions and can stand up and say it will certainly sway a lot of people in that direction.
All right, very good. Further questions? Mr. Wood Jr., I thought I saw one from you.
Yes. Madam Chair, I'm curious to know if the speaker feels that she spoke eloquently and passionately about the rise of white supremacy. I'm curious to know if the speaker feels that the rise of white supremacy is something that is taking place as sort of a mainstream phenomenon in American life. Is this broadly distributed, or is this something that's happening around the fringes of American life in a way that's getting a lot of attention, but that is still a phenomenon of the edges?
I want to thank Mr. Wood for his question, and forgive me, the prior person, I didn't thank you. I'm getting the format.
You're doing a great job.
I'm trying. I would like to think, Mr. Wood, that this white supremacy behavior is at the fringes, but I think we've seen evidence, mounting evidence in the last 12 years that it is not a fringe movement. I think we see unfortunately embedded in some places in law enforcement, a white supremacist ideology. We see it in civilians. We see comments in the schoolyard, and we see comments at the town hall in our local cities and towns. I don't think it's on the fringes. I think it is more prevalent than we appreciate. And I want a leader who is not afraid to speak to the truth of that and to invite us to imagine an America where nobody's afraid of their existence, of their safety on the basis of their skin color, religion, sexual orientation, gender, any reason.
All right, and finally, we will go to Jeremy, I might butcher this, Rothkuschel? Go ahead, ask your question to me. You're muted right now. Go ahead and unmute.
Okay,
there we go.
I've unmuted again. Thank you, Madam Chair. Very, very close. Jeremy Rothkuschel. And I would ask you, Madam Chair, whether the gentlewoman speaker has considered what the impact of the subtextual white supremacism might have played in our so-called foreign policy, most obviously during this quote unquote new American century unleashed post 9/11 that has destroyed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives around the world, including soldiers here at home, including suicides, and what the gentlewoman speaker might consider in terms of, if there were to be a President Biden, what we who consider ourselves anti-racist internationally might do to push him who voted for the war in Iraq, for example, towards something more respectful internationally. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Roth-Kushel, thank you for your question. I hear in your question the pain.
So you have to address it to me. Sorry.
I'm sorry. See, I know
The questioner. Yeah, no, I know it's new.
Madam Chair, the questioner asked a great question. And I'm laughing only because I'm nervous, not because this question.
It's totally fine. You're doing
I-
us all a favor by going first. Yep.
Thank you for saying that. I hear the heart in the questioner's question. And I hear the implicit allegation that Democrats have been no better than Republicans in many respects when it comes to valuing human life in this country and around the world. So I will say yes to the questioner. I have hope that a President Biden will have the moral authority and the relationships with others around the world and with people in our own country to forge a philosophy about all humans being of worth and all humans mattering, and forging policies, whether they are foreign policies or domestic policies, that value each and every one of us.
Wonderful. All right. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands, excellent questions and very good answers. Yes. All righty. Wonderful. So we will now go to a speech from Ms. Hoge. You have 6 minutes. Go ahead and unmute and let's hear it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to join Julie in saying, yes, I too wondered how I ended up on such an illustrious panel. So you're not alone. I know my bio said I'm a Hollywood actress, but really I'm sort of below the D list. I'm just a working stiff that happens to act for a living. I am a mom in a minivan. I have 4 kids. And while my written remarks actually say that I believe that race is the least important thing about any of us, and it should be, or you're really a boring person, I can't help but notice that the previous speaker and I are clearly alternate universe versions of each other. I too have a Black father and a white English mother. I grew up in Kingston, Jamaica, and emigrated to America, and our paths therefore thereupon diverged. And so here I am speaking on behalf of the current president of the United States. My location, however, is really important and germane to that. I live in California, which, as we all know, is a one-party state. The first thing I want to do to address you, Madam Chair, is to answer your question by repeating it. Who is the leader that America needs right now? Well, first of all, we have to agree on what America is. And there's been so much talk in the past year about our democracy, and we're losing our democracy. We're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. We are an idea. And as someone who emigrated here to escape mobs, that's what democracy really is. Mob can be mob rule. We are the emergency exit and the safety valve for the rest of the world. And so if we can all be on that path, then we have to say, the second thing I have to ask when John invited me to participate is, why are we here? Are we actually speaking to undecided voters? Is there really such a thing? One does wonder every year, who are these 3 people that both get presidential candidates from the Republican and the Democrat side spend millions of dollars trying to move in the state of Ohio, Florida, and Pennsylvania? But why we're here, I think, at Braver Angels, certainly why I'm here, is to understand each other. Because I could say that it's about now and it's about President Trump, but it's not, because I've been a conservative since after September 11th. And I can tell you that we've been closeted in California for a long time. And before President Trump was Hitler, Mitt Romney was Hitler and Bush was Hitler. So forgive me if I don't fall into the Hitlerian analogies. On any given Sunday, either team can win the game. And so what I find most distressing about what's going on in politics right now is that so many of my friends, and all my friends are well-meaning, educated, amazing people, have no idea at all that the president could win a second term. They just don't think it's possible. So I have to back up again and say, in answer to your question, to argue for the president is to first say, how did he win the first time? Why did he win? And who did he defeat to win? I think if you're on the left, you think, oh, he crushed Hillary Clinton, it was awful, and that's why we hate him, because we believe the other things. But the crazy thing is, he vanquished the Republican Party. And I think Bret will probably speak to this later, but I ran, as John said, for a small office against an incumbent, talk about a losing kamikaze mission, but it was an incredible civics lesson. And what I learned is that people who are career politicians from both sides have almost zero interest in solving any problems. Their number one interest is collecting enough money to get elected again. So we have to look at Donald Trump as this perspective of a complete outsider, someone who signs the front of checks and not the backs. And what makes him so unique to American politics right now is that he is destroying the entire system, and he has enemies on the right and on the left. This particular immigrant, when I switched from being a subject to a citizen, it was a momentous occasion. And that pathway drew me to appreciate and understand what Donald Trump has done. I think our politics used to be that both sides believed that we personally wanted to be left alone. And our main area of disagreement was, should the government be a safety net? Should the government do this or that? And how much should they spend doing it? Well, what we've ended up with, and certainly what we've ended up with in California, is a government that wants to reach in and adjust the temperature on our neighbor's bath water. So it's gone beyond the issue of freedoms. I would just say the most important thing we have to do in any political season is always go to the primary source. If someone tells you that Joe Biden said the N-word, look up why. He was quoting someone. If someone says Donald Trump said there were fine people on both sides, read the transcript. He disavowed white supremacy. We should all be grateful for the United States of America. Those of us who came here from other places are. So on November 3rd, root for whatever team you're on. On November 4th, let's all shake hands, apply a liberal dose of sanitizer, wash with soap and water for 20 seconds, and get back to living together.
All right. Wonderful ending. I especially love the hand sanitizer.
I have 4 kids. I have to think about them all the time.
That you do. My goodness. Even without COVID. All right. Are there questions for the speaker? All right. Let's go with Leo Gilmore. Go ahead and ask your question to me.
Madam Chair, I'd like to know the speaker's opinion about what Donald Trump's greatest leadership qualities are and what is the top area he needs adjusting.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the questioner, and thank you to all of you who on a Tuesday night are, all 613 of you who are here. We are not normal people, any of us, to be invested and involved in this. I would say, and again, I'm going to say this as someone who is completely skeptical about the whole Donald Trump is running as a Republican thing. I was like, really, on our side? Why? But it turns out that having someone who's run a business, and a business that specifically is about building, has been an amazing thing, because you have to delegate. A builder, while an individual contractor can know how to mud your walls or set the floor joists, they're not going to get very far if they don't teach other people to do those things and delegate them. So I think his number one skill is a delegator. I don't know if anybody watched back in the beginning of his presidency when the first round of 25th Amendment talk was raised. And so he opened up a cabinet meeting to the cameras and let everyone talk, and sort of drew out of people their thoughts and opinions. And I think that's a real gift.
You're about at time, so you can
yeah,
finish your sentence if you want to.
What could he could do better? Some people would like him to be less brash. I'm kind of a fan of brash because I'm brash.
All right. Excellent. Further questions? Let's go to Terry Webb. Go ahead and ask a question to me.
Yes, Madam Chair. I would like to ask the speaker a question about whether she believes, as many people have pointed out, Michael Cohen being one of them, and a number of mental health professionals, and I'm one of them, as to whether she agrees or disagrees with the fact that Trump acts like a mob boss and expects loyalty from everybody. Does she agree or disagree, and why?
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, the questioner. I actually saw that in the chat, and I see a lot of those veins of questions. I'm going to lump them all together, if that's okay. Is he a mob boss? Is he a P-word grabber? Is he a discriminator? Is he no, or I wouldn't be voting for him. I find it fascinating that so many people have questions about the freedoms that are going to be taken away. But when you look at, and what we all have to do, and as a mother I do this, is look at people's actions, not their words. So this taking away of freedoms and throwing people into jail and squashing our lives, I haven't seen any of that come from the president. I live in California. I have seen it come from Gavin Newsom and from Mayor Eric Garcetti. Those are actually, and that's my last plug, is that local elections matter 100 times more than who you vote for president. But I would say go back to the primary sources. And if someone says, and if I was in a conversation with the questioner, I would say, please show me where this mob boss behavior happened. I'd like to see it, because I would always like to see that evidence.
All righty. And we'll take one more question from a panelist. Go for it, Ms. Clymer. Ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I want to thank Ms. Hoge for her great speech. I do want to ask her how she feels about the recent release of Donald Trump's tax returns and the fact that he does owe hundreds of millions of dollars. And how that squares with the idea that he is a successful businessman.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to break the rules and say, is that a MAC shade of red? Because it's gorgeous. I know that was against the rules. I would say a couple things. So when you run for office, and I did as a nobody, right, a citizen, you go down to the registrar's office, and even for this little office, you pick up a binder about this big. And in that binder are financial disclosures that you have to make to run for school board, for whatever, and you have to make those disclosures for president. So Donald Trump has said many times, but I don't think people have really caught on, that those financial disclosure forms are way more in depth and revelatory about your financial dealings than even tax returns. Because as anyone who has their own business will tell you, the goal, anyone who has any money will tell you, the goal of your tax return is to reduce your tax liability. Yes. And if you are in the real estate business, you do carry a lot of debt because you leverage that to as mortgages. So for example, if you lived in California, you could live in a shack and have $1 million mortgage for that shack. Do you owe $1 million? Yes, but it's also in your asset column, and you're paying your mortgage as you go along. So the stuff that comes out of tax returns doesn't come as much as the politicians who work for the government their whole lives and end up multimillionaires.
Alrighty. With that, the speaker's thanked. Jazz hands. And if any of you can be funnier than Ms. Hoge, you get bonus points. Extra jazz hands. Yes. Splendid. Alrighty. We will now go to a speech from Dr. Weinstein. Go ahead and unmute yourself. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Unlike the first two speakers, I think I know why I'm here. I think I'm here to play the role of the common enemy that will unite the rest of you. So let's see if I can pull it off. Our republic is coming apart. That is a remarkable statement, given the immense success of the American experiment. Our productivity, ingenuity, and ambition have rightly been the envy of the world. Our commitment to both justice and freedom have drawn multitudes to our shores in search of a better life, a top-notch education, or simply to escape from the oppressive dynamics that so easily come to characterize life under other regimes. Nation after nation has sought to emulate American dynamism by mirroring our liberty-focused constitutional framework, and these attempts form the bedrock of the pluralistic and tolerant West. The United States makes such a powerful case for secular, tolerant pluralism that our model, if we can keep it, would surely continue to spread and, given time, might easily take hold in the remainder of the world without the need to spread it by force. Given this, why on earth would citizens of such a brilliant nation place it all in jeopardy? Why would we turn on each other and place our most valuable asset at risk? Why would Americans treat America, the ship on which we travel through time, with such reckless disregard? We Americans have lost our way. We find ourselves grasping at straws, demonizing each other, fictionalizing our past, and chasing dreams that any student of history would know are sure to end in disaster. We are being foolish, but not because we are fools. We are vulnerable to the allure of bad options because we have been systematically denied better ones. Our lack of good options isn't the result of a conspiracy. At least it did not start out that way. It is the result of a natural evolutionary process, one that has cryptically hollowed out the republic and turned it into something else. Our democratic republic was founded on the radical idea that better proposals should outcompete worse ones, and by this mechanism that governance should perpetually serve the people. When this process functions, it creates a tight relationship between the citizenry and its representatives. Our founders were right. The consent of the governed is the sole basis for governmental legitimacy. But this brilliant structure contains a flaw. Corruption is like water. It finds the cracks, however small, and enlarges them. Money, which may initially be generated through insight and effort, buys influence. Small amounts at first, but influence carries with it the ability to slant the playing field in one's favor, producing access to more wealth. This wealth generates more access to power, which in turn generates more avenues to further wealth. This positive feedback cycle has broken the relationship between citizens and their government and has handed the reins to elite rent seekers and allowed them to hoard opportunity, safety, and well-being. Our government is now overwhelmingly malignant. It functions to the benefit of special interests and against the legitimate interests of the people. This culture of corruption is managed and preserved by major political parties, which function effectively as crime syndicates. They battle with each other for power they can monetize, but they also collaborate to freeze out competitors. Their shared purpose is to protect their actual constituents, moneyed special interests, domestic, foreign, and multinational, and to prevent democratic processes from forcing them to cater to those unwilling or unable to pay them for a seat at the table. In order to retain power, the major parties keep us mesmerized with divisive, phony battles and ghost stories. For as long as they can keep us from teaming up to oust them, they have little to fear from the largely ceremonial electoral power that remains in the hands of citizens. For its part, pathological governance has left Americans confused. Some imagine that America was founded as a racket to steal their labor. Others see the very idea of government as inherently oppressive. And as these falsely divided ideologies remain stalemated in battle, nothing changes, and the only meaningful process is one of gradual decay and erosion. The American public does not have good options in this election. We lost it already. It happened many months ago. But we have not yet lost the next election, and the path to victory involves announcing our intention to leave the cave and escape the shadows projected on the wall. Sooner rather than later, we must defeat one or both of the major parties, and we can't do that so long as we play by their rules. A vote against the major party candidates is our announcement that we will not tolerate the culture of corruption that has taken over Washington, and we intend to join forces and right the ship of state.
All right, very good. Are there questions for Dr. Weinstein? Yeah, jazz hands, absolutely. Let's give him some jazz hands, yes. Ms. Lythcott-Haims.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to ask the speaker about his comment that we have been fictionalizing our past. I'm wondering if he could provide an example from both parties as to how we are fictionalizing our past.
Well, I think we are fictionalizing. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks for the question. I believe we are fictionalizing in multiple directions. In effect, we are selling narratives that rationalize the wholehearted embrace of something that actually isn't functioning in our favor. So, an obvious example would be the 1619 Project, which portrays America as fundamentally about the hegemony of one race over another, rather than that being an embarrassing stain on our founding principles. And on the other side, as I mentioned in my speech, I believe we are being presented with the idea that governance itself is an infringement on liberty, and that is all that it has ever been, rather than a mechanism that actually, when it functions well, liberates us.
All right, very good. We're going to next take a question from Michael Kane. Michael, go ahead and ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Big fan of the speaker. Appreciate your efforts with Unity 2020. I was curious to know how you might respond to somebody.
How he might respond. Yep.
Correct. Yes. Yes. How the speaker might respond to, given the fact we have two options that most of us are not much fans of. How would the speaker respond to somebody who is choosing to vote for the devil they know?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the questioner. This is a great question, and I think it comes down to an issue buried inside of game theory. If you think of our elections as one-off events, then of course it makes sense to vote for the entity which is closest to your values that has a shot at winning. On the other hand, if you think about elections as iterated, that is to say they exist in a series, then the fact that we have already lost this election means that we have to ask the question of whether or not we can better serve our long-term interests by rejecting the duopoly and announcing that we are free agents, or if we must play the game that it tells us we must play and we must choose the lesser evil. Now, mind you, we are told two different stories about who the lesser evil is. And as Roxanne pointed out in her talk, we have also previously been told that Mitt Romney was such a great threat to the Republic that we were obligated to vote against him and George Bush before him. And so in essence, this is a permanent story about what our moral obligations are. And it is now and always has been nonsense.
All right. And for a final question, we will go to Mr. Luke Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, does the speaker believe that virtue and culture, virtue and a healthy culture among the people and their leaders are the things that preserve liberty and democracy? Or does the speaker believe something more close to the idea that balanced institutions and laws and factions and traditions are the things that preserve liberty and democracy? In other words, do we need more enlightened leaders, or do we need healthy and balanced institutions? If we can only pick one of two, which is the more important thing to preserve?
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the questioner. That's a tough one, and I'm going to sidestep it because I think what actually we need is to remove the distortions that pervert the democratic process so that we can actually battle over the things that truly divide us and not battle over the things which surely ought to unite us. And I'm a firm believer that that process will not award all the gains to one side or the other, but that actually the magic of our system involves the discovery of which side is right on which issues, and that the combination of those things, effectively dining a la carte, gets us where we need to go.
All right, very good. Excellent questions, excellent answers. With that, the speaker is thanked. More jazz hands, yes, definitely. All right, very good. So we will now go to a 6-minute speech from one of the much maligned class of politicians, Leader Gephardt. Go ahead and unmute yourself and share with us your thoughts.
Madam Chair, thank you for having me on this Zoom video, and it's an honor to be with these other great speakers and to learn from everybody. I'm going to start my advocacy for Joe Biden by saying some things that I always like to say about democracy and politics. In my experience, politics and democracy is a substitute for violence. And our ancestors made a decision 240 years ago to put 535 people in the room, not one, because they wanted us to have a democracy and for us to make decisions on behalf of the American people in a republic together in that committee of 535 for the federal government and not have one person make those decisions. That was a fateful and important decision, along with saying that we should all be free and equal as American citizens. When I was leader of the Democrats in the House for 14 years, I was always in awe that we could make decisions over tough, complicated questions that were bitterly fought on both sides. And at the end of making that decision, the losing side, and by losing side, I mean not only the members of Congress who were on the losing side, but the people they represented out in the country who felt equally emotional about the subject, were willing to grudgingly accept that decision because they thought the process was fair. And that really is the magic, to me, of democracy. If we had an authoritarian model, which is always the alternative to democracy, you wouldn't have that grudging acceptance when big decisions were made. You'd have people picking up rifles and leaving the country. The country would be in a constant state of revolution. So I am deeply impressed with what we've been able to do with self-government. But in my experience, that government can only succeed if the people writ large and the people who are elected to represent them deeply respect one another, even though they can often violently disagree on very important issues. And it's on that ability that I am most interested in Joe Biden being elected. First, I think he can unite the country. We are badly divided. We're probably as divided today as we have been since the Civil War. There are a lot of reasons for that. I don't want to blame it on President Trump or anything else alone, but we are badly divided. We are polarized. And so I think Joe Biden has the ability to show us respect for one another by respecting all the people and respecting the people who do not vote for him if he wins, as well as the people who vote for him. The last thing I'd say is that I've known him for 40 years. I've worked with him. I know that he can sit down with Republicans and Democrats and find bipartisan solutions. And I really don't think you can solve anything unless it's bipartisan, because if it's only partisan, the people who lose will try to upset the administration of that law. Last point, Bret is right. We need basic reform in this society. This country is in trouble. Our democracy is ill. America is ill. We need real electoral and campaign reform. We need action on change. We need immigration reform. We need media and information reform so that we can be the great democracy and leader in the world that we have been and should be.
All right, very good. Jazz hands for Leader Gephardt. Yeah. Are there questions for the speaker, who's also the leader? Let's go with Roxanne. Ms. Hoge, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and please express our gratitude to Mr. Gephardt, who was the leader when I was a Democrat. I would love to know, he mentioned briefly that we need media reform, and I'd love to know how much of a part he thinks this division has been brought about or shepherded or midwifed by the media, and how it's changed since he was in Washington.
Well, I think it's really exacerbated the problem. A lot of what Bret talked about is also at the root cause of this problem. Look, a lot of people have been left behind by the way we've dealt with trade laws, the way we deal with capitalism, the way election reform and campaign reform has not really been passed. It's been worse by a whole bunch of decisions made by courts and by the Congress in the last years. So there's a lot of reasons we're divided. But then when you put the politicization, I can never say that word right, that making the legacy media channels and outlets politicize, which is what's happened. So you start with Fox News, then you have Sinclair, then you got MSNBC on the other side. You know, the way you can make money in that business is to really go set up a cult that only listens to you, and to really be a propaganda arm of one party or the other. And then you lay social media on top of that, where everybody's a journalist, so nobody's a journalist. You don't know what you're reading is whether it's true or not true. We have no filter on any information source on social media. We used to have
Gephardt,
newspapers. Now
you're about at time, and I'm getting scared. So
no,
it's all very good points. For our next question, we will go to Mr. Boyd. Harry Boyd, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a young man in the civil rights movement working for Martin Luther King, in the citizenship schools of the movement, which Andy Young once called the foundation of the whole movement, I saw that actually everyday people are the primary drivers and agents of great change in America, with government playing an important role as partner, but not as the savior. So I wonder what the chair, Gephardt, who's had a distinguished career, thinks about the role of we the people, the founding agent in the Constitution, what role we have to play in addressing the huge challenges we face as a nation, and what a president could do to catalyze and help to support that change.
All right.
Madam Chair, I totally agree with what Harry just said. This is self-government. And if people don't engage as citizens in the governance of the country, it will not happen. We would never have civil rights without Martin Luther King, without John Lewis, without all the others who marched and caused the good trouble that John Lewis talked about to bring about those changes. That's what did it. If people really want campaign reform, they've got to start demonstrating for it. If people don't want special interests to control their government, then let's pass a law that says that the only contribution a member of Congress or a member of a legislature can take is from individuals up to a certain amount of money, whatever you could agree on. And then why don't we agree to have taxpayer funds match those individual contributions so that we, the people, are actually paying for the campaigns for the people to run for office. And if you want special interests to control your government, then you got to pay for it. You can't own something that you don't pay for. And so to get people exercised about making these reforms, reforming capitalism, reforming education,
Leader Gephardt, forgive me. It's all right. We put a 1 minute limit on question answers. That's the only thing, but I love your passion. We'll take our final question for this from Gerald. Gerald, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm wondering from Congressman Gephardt how the resistance movement, the total opposition to anything that President Trump has tried to do, has contributed to the diversity and division in the country.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, in answering this question, I'd say that, again, we're terribly polarized. I mean, we're at a point where if you're not in my tribe, I hate you. I don't want to hear about you. I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't want to coexist with you. I don't want to be in the same country with you. Get to that point, if that's widespread, and it's pretty widespread today, you're done as a democracy. You're not going to be a democracy anymore. We're going to go to Plan B, which is authoritarian model. Nobody's going to like that, but that's where we're headed. And that's why making these reforms, cooperating, listening to one another, respecting to one another. When I was leader, I put 60 members in a room every night at 5 o'clock and made them listen to one another until we could find a compromise to get things done. That's the only way you do it. We're human beings. We have to communicate and use our big brains and get bipartisan agreements to get things done.
All righty, very good. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for Leader Gephardt. Wonderful. So glad to have you here, sir. So we are now about halfway through for the evening, and I just want to give you all a preview of what is coming next. So we have 3 more speakers, and very much looking forward to hearing what they say. And then who will speak for 6 minutes, and we'll have some questions afterwards. And then as we've been doing, and then each speaker will give 2 minutes of a response, basically, and we'll go in the same order. We will not do questions between those. So those can be rebuttal or closing remarks or however folks want to think about it, but just giving everybody a chance to respond to what's been said. For now, we are going to do our first poll of the evening. So we know that folks love to be able to like share what they think. And so we're going to go ahead and put up our first poll, and we want to know what you think of the debate so far. So Jamie, if you would go ahead and start it. You have 1 minute to answer. Panelists, feel free to vote as well. Interesting. I think a lot of people must be voting similarly.
15 more seconds.
Vote now or forever hold your peace. Only in our poll, though.
All right. We have 78% voting.
All right, great. So as you all can see, we are loving the respectfulness tonight. So thank you, everybody, thus far. Yeah, jazz hands, absolutely. Panelists, you deserve some jazz hands. Thank you so much for that. And the truthfulness and the honesty, people are really hearing that too. And passion, yeah. Sometimes we have these folks who don't come forth with their passion, but I feel like we're hearing it tonight. I think the main thing it sounds like people would like a little bit more of his personal experiences. And so that's understandable for an election related debate, but yeah, feedback for you all for the rest of the evening, that's something that the crowd would really like to see. So, excuse me, pardon me. Something that went in the chat made me laugh, and then I started coughing. Oh goodness. For our next speech, we're going to go to Dan McCarthy. Dan, go ahead and unmute. You have 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I apologize for the technical difficulties I've been experiencing throughout the evening. I hope my remarks are not disrupted by any gremlins in the communication system. And let me also say how honored I am to be addressing you tonight. And the august company that I am in really very much humbles me. And so it's a great pleasure. I think going off of some of the remarks we have already heard this evening, a question that needs to be brought forward and a question that will support the case for Donald Trump as the leader that America needs right now is this very question of the nature of our system of government, the disillusionment or alienation that many people feel from this system, and the question of whether consensus and bipartisanship are the appropriate methods for restoring a proper sense of trust, a sense of respect, and a degree of confidence of the people towards their government, and a sense of service from the government towards the people. And unfortunately, I have to answer somewhat in the negative, because it seems to me that in fact, the consensus policies that have been followed in Washington, D.C. by both parties, by the Democratic Party under the Clintons, by the Republican Party under the Bushes, the consensus parties, rather the consensus policies that have been followed since the end of the Cold War have been largely disastrous for the American people. And they have in fact inculcated a great backlash, not only on the right, not only to be seen in the form of President Trump and his populist movement, but also among progressives who flocked to the banner of Bernie Sanders in the 2016 and the 2020 primaries. And also, of course, in individuals such as Dr. Weinstein, whose criticism of both parties seems to me to be quite apt. The consensus policies that have been followed since the end of the Cold War have involved a large degree of activist foreign policy. They have involved wars everywhere from the Middle East to Serbia, and they have involved trade policies which have generally put the priorities of big business, finance, and really an ideological interest group that favors free trade simply on grounds of abstract principles over the jobs and the lives and the well-being of Americans throughout the land. And this consensus, again, was something which both parties bought into. And for all of the bitterness of American politics over the last 25 or 30 years, over issues such as individual rights, over things like judicial decisions on Roe v. Wade and other questions, over things like the Second Amendment, all of these controversies have nevertheless masked a surprising degree of agreement on issues regarding trade and foreign policy. And those two things are connected, of course, because one of the sort of largest elements, both in our trade policy and in our foreign policy, has, of course, been the American relationship with the People's Republic of China since the end of the Cold War. And that relationship has turned out to be rather abusive. It has allowed the People's Republic of China to abuse the United States and indeed to abuse its own people. And it simply has not produced the kinds of benefits that the architects of our policy back in the late 1980s and early 1990s had hoped for. So that we see that our own industries have had a loss of workforce because they've had a loss of market share, as you've had the rise of China as a great economic power. You have seen that this relationship with China has not, in fact, brought about the kinds of democratic and liberalizing reforms that we had hoped at the beginning of the 1990s would take place in the People's Republic of China as a result of economic openness. Donald Trump has to be reelected as president because he is the driving force in opposing this relationship with China and in questioning our foreign policy of interventionism as it has stood for the last quarter century.
All right, very good. Jazz hands, yes, absolutely. And Leader Gephardt, if you would just give us some jazz hands, it would just make my day. Yay, all right. Jazz hands for everybody. So the first question we're going to for Mr. McCarthy is actually from Sam Chang, who is evidently listening to us from Taipei. So Mr. Chang, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me.
Thank you. My question is that what sort of electoral reform do you support?
Does he support?
There's a specific.
Mr. Chang, if you could speak up just a little.
Okay, I got my microphone in
there
front
we
of me.
go.
Is that better? All right.
Yes, and ask the question
Yes.
to me.
Okay. What are the electoral reform proposal that you support? And there's a specific proposal that Lawrence Lessig of Harvard supports, let voters have the choice to vote against instead of for a candidate, and have such vote counted as -1.
All right.
So so I ask the panelists, whether they like this idea and what other proposals they like.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the question that has come to us. I am skeptical of very technocratic reforms to the electoral system. And what I think is most important for the health of our democracy is devolution and more self-government at the local level. And it seems to me that one reform that should be contemplated in the long run is the question of whether very large states such as California and Texas should perhaps be broken up into several smaller states to better allow for the local sense of community to come through in government and to foster a greater sense of self-rule.
All right. For our next question, we will go to Leo Gilmer, also panelists. Remember that you can raise your hands if you have anything to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to know, does the speaker really think that Donald Trump will support the 3 branches of government model as legitimate as originally designed?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The individual speaking right now very much believes that Donald Trump understands and respects and really has no choice about respecting the 3 branches of government as they exist and in their original intentions. We've just had a wonderful demonstration of this with Donald Trump's quite correct and proper appointment of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. And she, of course, is an originalist who will keep the Supreme Court on the sort of original constitutional focus that the Founding Fathers had in mind. And Donald Trump is, of course, acutely aware of the importance of Congress, which is why he has campaigned for his own party within the legislative branch. And Donald Trump is also a return to constitutional originalism in that he is fighting back against the unconstitutional administrative state, a sort of unconstitutional executive that has grown up as an encroachment upon the genuine constitutional executive outlined by our Founding Fathers.
Right. And for our final question, we will go to, I love this name, Rosa Zubizarreta, something like that.
Yes, thank you. That is actually correct. Madam Chair, I really appreciate the speaker's recognition of the downsides of free trade for American workers. And I would like to ask him how he sees protecting the sustainability of American workers in the face of an existential climate crisis.
Right.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the questioner as well. It seems to me that the hope of many progressives that the climate crisis can be addressed through international agreements, especially with the People's Republic of China, are misplaced in their optimism. And that in fact, what we need is a US industrial policy that focuses on US workers. And that because we have higher environmental standards than many of our global rivals, such as China, we need to also have a degree of protection for our economy, our industry, and our jobs and our workers, so that our higher standards of environmental protection do not become a millstone around the necks of our working class. We need to combine those two things, environmental priorities with priorities for labor.
All right, very good. With that, the speaker is thanked. Excellent questions and excellent answers. Yes, jazz hands, including from Leader Gephardt. Hooray. All right, for our next speech, we will go to eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Yes, Ms. Clymer, go ahead. Unmute, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate it. It is such an honor to be here in such distinguished company. I really love this format. I think it's such a wonderful way to engage in thoughtful, good faith discussions on policy. And it is the complete antithesis of social media, thank God. So it's really wonderful. You know, I do feel like I have a foot in 2 Americas. You know, I'm from the great state of Texas. I am a proud military veteran. You know, I'm a Christian whose faith is very important to me. I go to church every Sunday. I am a gun owner, but at the same time, I'm also a proud trans woman. I have very strong progressive values. I believe in the complete separation of church and state. I believe in comprehensive gun reform that keeps guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. I believe in a strong system of government in which each branch is able to correctly and aptly check the others and hold power accountable. And it feels like right now we have someone in power in Donald Trump who disregards and constantly seeks to split America. I'll be frank with you. I don't like identity politics. I think they're exasperating. I think they're annoying. They're tedious. They're such a massive distraction from things that should matter. Working families who have to put food on the table, take care of their children, and get by day to day shouldn't have to worry about whether or not someone can marry someone or what someone should do with their own bodies. But I'll also be frank with you in the fact that the greatest proponent of identity politics, the greatest champion of identity politics living is Donald Trump. This is someone who aggressively seeks to divide us along lines of race. This is someone who aggressively seeks to divide us along lines of gender identity, of sexual orientation, of religion, on and on and on. For the last 4 years, we've seen this come up again and again, where this White House, and by extension, much of the Republican Party, have enabled policies and initiatives that seek to divide Americans. One of the most heinous parts of this has been the ban on trans people in the military. The biggest employer in the world of transgender people is the United States military. Bar none, no one even comes close. 15,000 trans people are employed by the United States military, or were before this ban took place. And what was so heartbreaking as someone who served in the military for 6 years, honorably and to standard, was to watch this White House aggressively go after trans people who are honorably serving in our military, and to make up just the most vicious lies about our service. There was a lie about it being too costly for the military, when in fact, the Department of Defense and the RAND Institute specifically said that the cost of open transgender service was negligible, that would have minimal effect, if any, on the overall military budget. There was the lie about it being an effect on military readiness and unit cohesion, when in fact our top military leadership testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee, and to a person, each head of every military branch said to our elected representatives in the United States Senate that there had been zero effect on military readiness and unit cohesion with trans people serving openly over the 3-year period that we were allowed to. And then finally, this heinous idea that there are medically disqualifying reasons why trans people can't serve. When in fact the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, past surgeons general who have served in the military have all come out and specifically and directly said there's no reason why trans people can't serve in the military for medical reasons. So you have all these experts who have lined up and been opposed to this. Then you have the American people, 70% of whom are opposed to a ban on trans people in the military. You have the Republican Party, many of whom openly, elected officials who are Republicans serving in the House and Senate, who have come out and said that this ban is a distraction away from important issues. There is no merit to it. It is destructive to, quite frankly, our national security. So the only person standing between trans people serving openly and honorably and the idea of a strong defense in our country that prioritizes, safety and security above all else, and ensures that everyone is part of the public square, and the trans people, as long as we meet the standard, as long as we are part of one team and doing the work that needs to be done, nothing else should matter, is Donald Trump. That's it. This is someone who has argued to the Supreme Court, literally argued to the Supreme Court that employers should be able to fire people solely for being LGBTQ, who has put forward a regulation that would allow medical providers, doctors, nurses, hospital receptionists to turn people away specifically for being LGBTQ. Folks, I am so tired of this. And I have to imagine that all of you, regardless of your political ideology, are tired of it. Why are we arguing about what people do with their bodies? Why are we arguing about who people love? Even now, there are so many other important issues to deal with. We do need a smaller government that prioritizes spending money in a way that is smart. We need a strong defense that prioritizes military readiness in a way that is responsible and ethical for the world and certainly for our country. All of these things matter, and yet we keep getting sidetracked by these social issues that should not be part of the equation at all. And so what I would say is that, Joe Biden is someone who's bringing people together, who believes that all people, regardless of their background, have dignity and worth and respect, and he's going to unite this country. And that's what I want, and I would hope that's what you want. Thank you.
All right, jazz hands at like exactly 6 minutes. Well done. Questions for the speaker? Let's start with Paul Turkelson. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yes,
to me.
Madam Speaker, I'm interested if the a presenter has an opinion on, as a supporter of Second Amendment rights, what has the Speaker heard from candidate Biden that indicates that he will be able to convince legitimate gun owners, such as the Speaker's self, that a vote for him is not a vote against gun rights? I have not heard it, and it concerns me as a Biden voter.
Oh, thank you. Well, Madam Chair, I would like to thank Mr. Turkelson for his kind remarks and his nice question. I would say that I have heard nothing from Joe Biden that sounds insensible. We do need universal background checks. We do need to close loopholes that allow people to purchase guns privately without background checks. The whole point of this is to keep guns from getting in the hands of people who should not have them. Now, I don't care what gun it is, quite frankly. But we need to keep the wrong type of people from having guns, and that's people who perpetrate heinous crimes against our populace and especially against our children.
All right, good. Further questions? Let's go to Matthew Perkowski. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me.
Hi, thank you. First, like to thank everybody for being here and for the wonderful discussion so far. Madam Chair, my question is, whether the Speaker feels that our present polarization truly emanates from Trump himself as a source, or would they perhaps acknowledge that we have, across the past 30 to 40 years, created a system of politics and media, including new media technologies, that increasingly thrive on division? And this was simply exploited by someone willing to tip the system over the edge, such that its flaws became completely unignorable.
Right.
Madam Chair, I would like to thank Mr. Perkowski for his question, and he's absolutely right. These divisions have existed before Trump, and unfortunately they will exist after. But the sad reality is that Donald Trump has exploited this, and instead of being the kind of leader who brings people together in response to these kind of divisions and these factors that lead to division in our country, he has only exacerbated them. He has enabled them under the strange and bizarre gamble that dividing this country would lead to greater power for himself. And folks, I gotta tell you, that scares the hell out of me. And it also embarrasses me as an American who wants to see our country united and focus on issues that ordinary Americans should care about.
All right, very good. And with that, the speaker is thanked.
Thank you.
Jazz hands for Ms. Clymer. Wonderful. All righty. So for our last 6-minute speech, we're going to go to Dr. Baker, who has in the chat promised the deeper understanding that we all requested in our poll. All right, Dr. Baker, let's hear it.
First, I just have to say, as somebody who came of age in the late 80s, Dick Gephardt is a gigantic figure for me. I'm a lifelong Republican. I was a Jack Kemp guy in 1988. I think you were actually more successful than Jack Kemp. But you just, I have to say, I mean, you're radiating integrity. You're tempting me. So I just want to thank everybody. Of course, I'm thrilled that Dick Gephardt is here. I thank everybody for being here. You could be binging Game of Thrones, as I have been doing lately, or Gilmore Girls, as my wife and daughter are probably doing right now. But you've chosen to support Braver Angels' effort to model civic virtue for our nation. The first thing I'm going to say is something different than what anybody else has said, and I'd be lying to you if I didn't say this. The biggest reason I voted for Donald Trump is because he has kept his promises to the pro-life community by appointing justices. You know, some people thought he might appoint his sister to the court or something like that, but he actually has followed through on those promises to us, justices who are at least open to the critique of Roe v. Wade and aware of the need to revisit the decision in light of what we know now versus what maybe we knew in 1973, medically and scientifically. I think there's a powerful cognitive tension involved in living in a society where unborn children of identical ages can either be celebrated in a framed ultrasound image or medically destroyed, depending on the option chosen. And it's my hope that we can reconsider our laws and acknowledge the personhood of the unborn child. Now, for the same reason, I'm unable to consider voting for Joe Biden because this is one of those issues where we have become super polarized. At one time, there were a significant number of pro-life politicians in the Democratic Party, and that situation has changed. Now, when it comes to Donald Trump, however, the headline issues center on matters of the economy and foreign policy, and I want to address some of those. When I studied economics at Florida State as a young man, I was completely convinced by the free trade philosophy. I can remember my father, a chemical engineer, trying to convince me that a flourishing manufacturing sector was important for American workers. And I thought that he was benighted and ridiculous. However, my view changed when I ran for Congress myself in 2016 here in West Tennessee. We are a big manufacturing hub along I-40. And as I attended events and spoke to audiences, I really learned that almost all of the blue collar folks that I met on the campaign had grave concerns about the continuing flow of manufacturing work out of the country, really felt that they had suffered significant economic loss. And they were looking for leaders who would try and preserve those jobs. And so in a sense, my economic theories were encountering these people's realities. This is about the same time that we began to learn from Nobel Prize winner Angus Deaton and others about the unprecedented reduction in the life expectancy of middle-aged working class people in the United States due to what have been termed deaths of despair from unemployment and opioid abuse. And so I have come to sort of realize that there's value in your approach to the economy to prioritizing work as opposed to maybe inexpensive consumption. And the people who are really worried about this, the people who are living these lives, many of them see Donald Trump as a champion who's fighting for them over against the elites. In addition, prior to the COVID virus outbreak, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, hardly a Trump crony, in fact, often the target of Trump barbs, observed that this economic expansion was proving superior in the sense that it seemed to benefit people at the bottom of the scale to a greater degree than we have typically observed in the past. And we had also observed record low unemployment for minorities during this expansion pre-COVID. I also support President Trump's reform of the corporate tax because I think we reached a point where our tax rate was not competitive with that of many other nations. In fact, I just looked it up before I came on. Over $1 trillion by 2019 had been repatriated to the United States as a result of that policy. So this policy change really short-circuited the efforts for many corporations to offshore their operations, to purchase a foreign company and then live under the laws of that corporate entity. There's also the issue of China, which Mr. McCarthy raised. And just to say that we really believed, it's no way sort of orthodox theories. We believed that with greater economic success would come greater respect for human rights, greater democracy. We have not seen that come to be the case with China. They're already reneging on many of their assurances to Hong Kong. And I think that Donald Trump has taken the right tack in giving China some meaningful pushback. Thank you very much.
All right. Jazz hands for Dr. Baker. Yes, absolutely. Questions? Ms. Clymer, go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. I want to thank Mr. Baker for his very honest and heartfelt speech. I want to ask Mr. Baker, given that there are now almost 230,000 deaths from COVID, that the United States leads the world not only in COVID contractions, but also deaths, and that we know beyond the shadow of a doubt now, it's been documented that Donald Trump knew about the severity of this very early in the year, as early as February, and has consistently disparaged Dr. Fauci and the work of scientists all throughout 2020. I was wondering, how would you square his record on COVID with your pro-life position?
Yeah, first of all, it's a different sort of a thing, right? In the sense that you're talking about an intentional act in the case of an abortion, as opposed to what I guess with something like COVID you might term negligence. Now, that having been said, I would take a little bit of an empirical issue with the question. My understanding is not that we are the worst in the world. That roughly our experience runs kind of in the middle of some of the European countries. But that having been said, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that he's been the most enlightened leader on COVID. I think that somebody raised a question about a national mask mandate, how Joe Biden would enforce it. We have a decentralized system in this regard, where governors and mayors are really doing a lot of the leading. So to me, the president's position on COVID, other than his efforts to speed a vaccine, are not of the foremost importance.
All right. And for a final question, we'll go to Evan Lenz. Evan, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me. Oh, did we just lose Evan? All righty. Well, in that case, we will instead go to Evan. If you're back, we can come back to you. But let's go to Jordan Smith. Jordan, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just like to know what the Speaker, how he prioritizes, given everything going on in our country right now, how he prioritizes job and economic issues over other social issues maybe facing our country as the biggest issue for the president.
Right.
Well, I indicated that for me, the biggest issue is the life issue, but subordinate to that, I think that basically Donald Trump's value proposition is in sort of altering our approach to trade and taking a different approach relative to China. I mean, there's a real sense, and we could argue about this empirically and go back and forth, but that the way we have dealt with China and some other nations disproportionately benefits elites as opposed to folks in the working class. I mean, to some extent, this conversation is the kind of conversation that I associate with Democrats. I mean, I really feel like Donald Trump, to some extent, when it comes to trade, has picked up a position the Democrats used to promote pretty hard. But in any case, I think that the people are always going to prioritize how they get their bread, how they live. And so that's why I think it's very important.
All righty. And with that, Dr. Baker is thanked.
Thank you.
Jazz hands. Yes, excellent. So we're now going to go to our sort of lightning round of 2-minute response speeches, and we'll go in the same order. We'll not do questions between these, but there's a feedback section for y'all to give feedback coming right next. So let's start with Ms. Lythcott-Haims. 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And I'm a newcomer to this whole process, and I hate the fact that I'm first because I got to like figure it out as we go. But okay, so here I go. Thank you. It's been amazing to be a part of this. From my colleagues who are supporting President Trump, I heard about the economy and trade. I heard a real condemnation of career politicians, of the inadequacy of a dual party system, questioning interventionist foreign policy, and preaching self-governance at the local level. I even heard about originalism. But when you look at the text of the Constitution of the United States as written, my great-great-great-great-grandma, Sylvie, who lived in Charleston, South Carolina, they made her 3/5 of a human. It's really hard to make an originalist or textualist argument when your very being was considered illegal or immoral. I mean, somebody like Charlotte Clymer, somebody like Julie Lythcott-Haims was not contemplated by the founders. Sometimes I dream about one of the founders coming back and being escorted through the United States by someone like Charlotte or someone like me, just to sort of have a conversation about, so let's talk about that Constitution and what did you actually have in mind and how do you think we should interpret it in our America today? Our lives are relevant and America has changed, and I believe our laws need to too. My mother grew up in post-World War II England when Churchill united his country and his people with rhetoric and heart and policies. She got cod liver oil delivered by the school. She got milk, she got food, she got healthcare, and she got a decent education. And now she's got a PhD from the United States of America. I'd like to live in an America that takes care of people like that. Joe Biden knows that you're less likely to have clean water, decent public schools, healthcare, health insurance, and a chance of surviving a routine traffic stop if you're Black or brown in America. I trust him to care about the fact that we all deserve a shot at a decent life, at a life, regardless of our skin color and every other aspect of our demographic and identity. I trust that he believes that we all should have a chance at that decent life. And I do not trust that Donald Trump believes that at all.
All right. Speaker is thanked. Yes, jazz hands. We're going to do fast jazz hands frequent this time. All right, Ms. Hoge, 2 minutes. You're muted, sorry.
Well,
there we
that
go.
was word. All right, we'll start again. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who participated and spent their evening staring into a phone or a laptop. I think the glory of America, especially for someone who came from another country, is precisely that we do have that Constitution, that document that actually set out a promise that we wrote, a promise that we all cashed later. I have to address the fact that the 3/5 compromise was not about making people, slaves, less people. It was not giving power that was unearned to slave holders. That's what that was about. And what's amazing to me is that so much discussion has arisen in the past few years about white supremacy. And I just want to put this in perspective. I have an HGTV rule about white supremacy and the KKK. I'm kind of into house porn. And so I watch a lot of HGTV and all I see are families, gay couples, Black people, white people, various, people that look like America, that look like my family, with the shades that go from lightest light to darkest dark and from origins all over the place. The amazing thing is that when you take the FBI or even the Southern Poverty Law Center numbers on white supremacists in America, it's less, around 8,000, than the number of people who are bronies and attended the last brony convention. A brony is an adult male who dresses up as a furry My Little Pony character. So let's just keep that in perspective. The reason I want Donald Trump to win is the reason that all of you should be happy when he does, no matter what side you're on, because Donald Trump as president will inspire our press to continue to be oppositional to the ruling party. The fact that he is a thorn in the side of the elite and the entrenched who think they can run our lives better than we can, that's a plus in America.
All right, jazz hands. Very good. Don't think I've ever heard bronies mentioned in a debate like this before. Mr. Weinstein, your turn, 2 minutes.
Well, speaking as a non-brony, I wanted to address a theme that I heard in a lot of the comments. It would seem that something that we all agree on is that there is some failure of unity and that this is a threat to the republic that has to be addressed. And I want to point out that it is very odd in the context of a moment where we all seem to recognize this jeopardy that the Democratic Party would have delivered a candidate that so fails to inspire. Whatever else you can say, whatever you think Joe Biden might do in office, he's not the person to bring us together. He can't even inspire his own party, much less bring people over from the other side at this point. And his very advanced age is not helping. Now, on the flip side, I would point out Trump is about as divisive a character as we have available. And although there is some truth in what Roxanne said about the fact that he's actually a true outsider, it's almost like he's a rival crime family who has muscled in on the action of the major parties. And that's not necessarily a hopeful sign. And for those of us Americans who are sick and tired of the established crime families, maybe there's something entertaining about having something new on our screens. But the truth is, it's not a solution to the basic problem of the corruption that is jeopardizing the republic. So if this isn't the time to challenge the corruption, when is it the time?
All right, jazz hands. Speakers thanked. Leader Gephardt, 2 minutes. And you're muted, yeah. There you go.
I hope we all always remember how fortunate we are to be American citizens. I always say that being an American is like winning the lottery. I grew up poor in St. Louis City. Neither of my parents got to high school. When I was in high school in the public schools in the city, I had a speech teacher one day who stopped me and said, "I think you could get a scholarship to go to college." I hadn't even thought of going to college. I knew nothing about it. I got the scholarship. I got to go to law school. This is the land of opportunity. America is ill. The democracy is ill. We need reform, basic reform in so many areas. And to get that, we need a president who will unite us and work together between the parties and between all the disagreements to get things done to restore this land of opportunity.
All right, jazz hands. That the speaker is thanked. All right, and Mr. McCarthy, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Our political system is competitive. It requires a certain amount of civility at the same time as it needs the honest expression of real differences of principle. And our system has worked brilliantly with that in mind. It has brought together opposing views on any number of issues. And over time, we have had great success at working out our differences and leading to a successful life together. Right now, what we have is a tendency of elite politicians in both parties to come to agreements among themselves that are detrimental to the great public. And this has led to the rise of populist movements both on the left and on the right. Donald Trump is himself not from an impoverished background by any means. He does, however, represent a necessary force of disruption and change within the political establishment. And it's only through his reelection that you can have the amount of disruption and transformation necessary to bring about a more honest kind of competition among sincere people on both the left and the right to solve some of the great problems that we've faced in our foreign policy, our trade policy, and indeed in terms of justice here at home. I think if we look at foreign policy in particular, we see that the Iraq war, for which Joe Biden voted, and which of course was launched under George W. Bush, a Republican, was a complete disaster, not only for Americans, but above all for the people whose country we invaded. And the death toll was appalling, and it became an almost genocidal event for the Christians of the Middle East. This kind of folly, which Joe Biden has supported, cannot be repeated, and it's something for which there really must be a penalty, and that penalty should be the end of the political prospects of someone like Joe Biden who supported that policy.
All righty, with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands, yes, very good. All right, Ms. Clymer, 2 minutes.
Wonderful. I want to thank you all again for being part of this conversation, and to everyone who's viewed today. I think it's really great that we can come together and talk about these issues in a charitable and good faith manner. But that's the thing about this. It is the idea of good faith in our governing process and our civics. The idea that we can all come together and discuss these things. Joe Biden is the kind of person who brings people together. A few years ago, no less than Lindsey Graham, who was in tears, told a reporter that there is, rarely a man as good as Joe Biden. This is the kind of man who has got endorsements from Colin Powell, from Ray LaHood, from numerous former Republican senators and congressmen, from whole groups of former national security professionals in the Bush and Reagan administrations, who Cindy McCain said is the person who really should be leading our country for the next 4 years. And yet he's also the person who got a rousing endorsement from Bernie Sanders, from Elizabeth Warren, from numerous other progressive leaders. Folks, I got to tell you, there is no leader in this country who has been able to do that. None whatsoever. Donald Trump certainly hasn't. Is there any prominent Democrat of the kind of stature of Lindsey Graham or Cindy McCain or Ray LaHood or John Kasich who has endorsed Donald Trump? The answer is none. Zero. The fact is that Biden is the kind of person who doesn't want anyone to be left behind, regardless of political party or ideology. That's what we want. We want a boring government that brings people together and stops throwing kerosene on the flames, because that is what Donald Trump has done for 4 years now. And I got to tell you, part of this is the cancer of white supremacy, and it is something that we all should be engaged in fighting. When you have crowds of people with torches marching on a college campus and saying that we need to, basically, remove the Jews, remove people of color from the United States to protect our soil, so to speak, that's a problem. And I would like to think it's something that all reasonable, credible people could agree on. Thank you so much.
That the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands from Ms. Clymer. Alrighty, and last but not least, Mr. Baker, take us home. 2 minutes. You're muted.
I would say that Donald Trump is not a singular phenomenon. I think that sometimes in the United States, we may be tempted to see him that way. We don't pay attention to what's going on in the rest of the world sometimes. You can look at Donald Trump, you can look at Brexit, you can look at the rise of different parties in Italy gaining power, or Brazil or Hungary or Poland. And so one way you can interpret this phenomenon is you can say, this is xenophobia and this is white supremacy. I would suggest that that is way too easy an answer. I think sometimes it's a self-flattering answer that we're the enlightened people and these are the bad, stupid people. I think that there's something else going on that is deeper and important and has sometimes economic causes. And I think that Donald Trump tries to address that. The other thing I would say is that I know that we tend to look at Donald Trump as this white supremacy guy. And I find it very strange that a reality TV star from Manhattan who has built giant skyscrapers all over the world is this odd figure of white supremacy. He doesn't exactly look like David Duke and these other figures that we remember. So I have some skepticism and cynicism of that explanation. I think I'll leave it with that.
All right. That the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands. All right, everybody. So now something exciting is going to happen, which is we are going to technically adjourn, and then we're going to just take a few minutes and reflect on what we've just experienced. But I'm a little bit of a stickler for parliamentary procedure. So if someone would say, I move we adjourn, and someone else would say second, you can just unmute and say it. That'd be great.
We adjourn.
All right.
Second.
There a second. Splendid. All right. With that, we are adjourned. So first of all, jazz hands. Give yourselves a round of jazz hands. Really well done, everybody. Really well done. This is to be honest, we were a little bit nervous about this one because this moment is so sort of high pitched and high tension. So really well done. I'd like to ask, attendees, you will notice that the chat has been opened, and I'd like to ask everybody in the room right now to consider 2 questions. And so panelists, this goes for you also. They are, what did you learn over the last couple of hours, and what did you enjoy? And attendees, go ahead and put your answers in the chat. And this is probably obvious, but occasionally people are like, I learned that the other side is wrong. Please don't do that. What did you learn that was useful and interesting to you? And what did you enjoy? And panelists, I will invite you to, you can just raise your hand, but just share with us your answers to those 2 questions. All right, Roxanne.
My muted. No. I learned y'all are amazing, and my HGTV rule still stands, and Americans really do like each other and are amazing, and every one of the panelists are people I want to learn more about and talk more to, and I think we should all know that we're going to be fine. America's going to be fine.
All right. Excellent comments coming in the chat, by the way, panelists. I would encourage you to look at them. And attendees, don't forget to chat to all panelists and attendees because we want everybody to be able to see what you said. Other panelists, Dr. Baker.
I just say that, you know, I had been in a couple of these debates before, and I think that we probably tried so hard to be nice that people wondered if we were going to trade any points at all. So this was my first time just to where there was some passion, you know, expressed right out of the gate. And I was nervous about that, and I think it worked great. And I think that the debate format was resilient, and we tolerated lots of expression. It all went well, and was edifying. And I enjoyed, yeah.
And you're what?
And I enjoyed it. I was happy.
And you enjoyed it.
Yeah, got a lot out of it. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, Ms. Clymer.
Yes, I just want to say that one of the things I enjoyed most about this was the respectful engagement. I think that, you know, this kind of discourse is really good for trading ideas and really engaging with how to move forward as a country. The one thing that I think I would really love for everyone here to delve more deep into when you leave this discussion is what white supremacy means. Because most often white supremacy is not a Klan hood or a burning cross or anything like that. Most often is the ways that we enable systemic racism in myriad petty little daily ways. And we're all complicit. I will end there.
Okay, I'm gonna just remind everybody that it's very tempting to keep going with the debate substance, and we're really trying to do what did you learn and what did you enjoy, but I'll let you get away with that one. Others. Leader Gephardt.
I relearned that even though we disagree on a lot of stuff, that we all love this country, and that really is heartening. And secondly, we all learn from one another, and none of us knows everything, but if you listen to others, you can learn a lot.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Totally. It's totally true. Mr. Weinstein, Dr. Weinstein, excuse me. You're still muted.
How
There you
about
go.
that? I learned that the America that used to allow us to have honorable disagreements with each other is still alive and well, which I thought was great. I would say, as a sort of companion point to that, I think once you've figured out how to get people onto the rules that allow us to have those kinds of discussions, actually, probably you could relax the rules a little bit, and we could probably remain respectful and tangle a little more directly. It'd be interesting to figure out how close to that line we could get.
If you're saying I'm very strict, you are right. And also, I think that's probably true. I think that we could do a redux of this sometime, and once the relationships are built, and see that actually is a potentially very interesting idea. Julie, I think I saw your hand.
I really appreciated what Bret just said. I was hungering for, so I learned that once I got over my initial nervousness at being a newbie in this format and with this organization, I really did want there to be more back and forth. And I trusted, what I'm trying to say is I trusted that this group was capable of that. I developed that sense of trust and in the process and in the people pretty quickly. So I guess, I don't know if that's something I learned or something I enjoyed. I'm also learning that there's somebody named Brian who's really taking issue with me in the chat.
Okay.
I'm not appropriate. I guess the one last thing I'll say is I learned how fundamentally different we are, standing in different places. I heard what I said not reflected back at all in what the opponent said, and I'm sure the opponents heard me not reflect back anything. So I'm still not sure that we were at all addressing each other's most basic needs. And if we could get to that place and actually feel that we are being heard and still disagreed with, I think that would be more nourishing than just kind of, here's what I think, here's what I think.
All right. Mm-hmm. Sure. Roxanne.
I heard you, Julia, and I would say that I've done one before with John where it was just two people, and that lends itself to that sort of understanding each other better, as opposed to here you've been given this amount of time to say something and we can refer ever so slightly to someone else. So I think that Braver Angels, which we all are giving kudos to in the chat, to April and to John and everyone who put this together, I think this is just sort of a step one, and now we can go forth and break bread with our alternate universe selves, which you are to me.
That's right. Yeah, there are lots of other ways that people can engage through Braver Angels. And I also it's a really good sign to me that what a lot of you are saying, and I see you, Dan, we'll go to you next, is that this was so good that it engendered trust, such that you would want to do this, with fewer, without the kid gloves, kind of, without the safeguards. That's a really good, the fact that you got there is a really good sign, and shows something quite good about this conversation. Dan.
I think it was helpful and kind of educative for everyone to have Dr. Weinstein here as a voice that was not necessarily on one side or another of the partisan divide, but was able to kind of mediate between these groups, or at least give a sense of extra dimension to the discussion, so that it did not simply become a formal sort of here's team red, here's team blue, but rather that there were a number of issues which everyone was sort of addressing in different ways from different directions, that there's a more complicated map of American politics than the one that you get from, for example, cable news.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. I think that's that, everybody. So the context, remember, for tonight's debate is that we are literally 1 week away from one of the most contested elections that we could imagine. And yet what we're seeing is that, let's see, it's 40%, a little bit over, no, more than that. Almost 50% of you are saying that what you heard tonight affects how you think about all this. That's really powerful. And even more powerful is what I see in question number 2. So 84% is tied with our last election debate for, I believe, the highest rating we've ever had on, does this debate change how you think about the other side? And so I just want to say that this is really good, y'all. Panelists, well done. And everyone who participated tonight, who was here, who showed up, who stayed the whole time. Most of you did stay the whole time, by the way. Yeah, this is really good. And I think that the fact that we can do this even now really is a hopeful sign for our country. So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And a round of applause / jazz hands for Madam Chair, April Lawson. She did a phenomenal job, as we've come to expect. And so the bar is high, somehow he tends to clear it. And so, folks, I won't keep you too long. We very much appreciate everybody taking the time to engage in a novel sort of project with us tonight. And that is the act, not just of civic discourse, but of genuinely listening and taking in the perspectives of people who are coming from a different place, but who have every bit as much of a share and an interest in the well-being of this nation as you do, as any of us have as individuals. And so I want to impress upon everybody the fact that while we stand here on the cusp of a presidential election, of a vote that a lot of people look at as climactic and maybe even apocalyptic, I am here to ask you, and we are here to ask you folks, not to think of this as the end of anything, but rather as the beginning of an opportunity to consolidate a movement towards reinvigorating the spirit of democracy and community in American civil society. What you witnessed tonight was a baby step on the way to rebuilding the norms of our discourse in a manner that prioritizes and arms us with an ability to engage each other empathetically, civically, patriotically, so that we can rebuild the muscle of self-governance in our society. Because I think one thing we all agree on is that as important as it is for us to elect politicians who reflect our interests and our values and our conscience in whatever direction that winds up going, the ultimate responsibility for the health of the United States of America rests with us. It rests with we the people. But we cannot execute that responsibility if we have fallen out of community, out of relationship, out of trust with one another. So if you want to be a part of building the civil society, if you want to be a part of building towards that more perfect union, that beloved community that Dr. King spoke of, then join us. Join our work at Braver Angels. You can become a member at braverangels.org. You can be a part of organizing and peacekeeping activities with us following Election Day. You can build up a Braver Angels Alliance in your community, in your college campus. Folks, our work is just beginning, because the real project of perfecting this union does not end with the vote that you cast. That is simply where it starts. So we look forward to building a House united with all of you. And we look forward to seeing you on the other side of the election.